If I could be straight, I would, Brian says. Brian is a 20-year-old gay fraternity brother who joined a fraternity in his first year at his university. I just think everything would be easier. Growing up would be easier, my relationship with my parents would be easier, yeah. I just think a lot of things would be easier. When you think of fraternities, what comes to mind? Parties? Board shorts? Drinking? What about hazing, gendered violence, and racism? Although seemingly limited to life on college campuses, fraternities are a core part of American life. Many leaders in US politics and business were in fraternities. Around 85% of Fortune 500 executives have belonged to a fraternity. 40 out of 47 US Supreme Court justices since 1910 were fraternity men. 76% of congressmen and senators have belonged to a fraternity. And nearly every US president and vice president born since the founding of the first social fraternity in 1825 has been affiliated with one. There is a hidden significance of college fraternities in American life. And I wanted to explore a very particular experience within fraternity life. Hi, my name is Jericho, and my project is entitled If I Could Be Straight, I Would. Hegemony and Belonging in the Experiences of Non-Heterosexual Fraternity Brothers. At the center of this research is a contradiction. Fraternities are spaces built around a deep sense of belonging, called brotherhood. At the same time, they are also shaped by hegemony in the form of hegemonic masculinity. Raewyn Connell's theory of hegemonic masculinity refers to a socially constructed cultural ideal of what it means to be a man, defining the boundaries of what forms of gender expression are appropriate for men and women. In the contemporary US, hegemonic masculinity is expressed through heterosexuality, dominance, and aggression, while marginalizing femininity and queerness. Hegemonic masculinity is not simply a set of attitudes or behaviors held only by some individuals. It exists as part of a broader social system, where individuals who embody or uphold hegemonic masculinity are rewarded for upholding these norms. In turn, this maintains the dominance of men who uphold these norms above women and men who don't. Judith Butler's concept of gender performativity is also relevant in how hegemony is created in fraternities. Like Connell in her conceptualization of hegemonic masculinity, Butler argues that gender is not something we naturally obtain, but is instead produced through repeated actions and behaviors that are recognizable as expressing a particular gender. And in fraternities, hegemonic masculinity shapes the choices that men make in their performance of gender. The stereotypical fraternity brother becomes recognizable not only because they are in a fraternity, but in part because of the way that they dress and talk, their hobbies and interests, alongside repeated performances of heterosexuality, dominance, etc. Previous ethnographies on fraternities have explored how fraternities produce and reproduce the hegemonic norms of fraternity life expressed through misogyny, racism, violence, and homophobia. Rhodes in particular argues that there are two ways that these norms are reproduced in fraternities. The first is that young men who uphold these norms are more likely to join a fraternity in the first place. The second is that fraternities socialize men who join fraternities into such norms. Interestingly, even despite the well-documented hegemonic masculinity of fraternities, evidence of non-heterosexual fraternity brothers has existed throughout fraternities' history. In the last 30 years, an emerging body of work has explored the experiences of non-heterosexual fraternity brothers. They describe a range of experiences, from alienation and secrecy to affirmation and meaningful brotherhood. So we return to the contradiction between the belonging created in fraternities and the hegemony that characterizes them, particularly in the experiences of non-heterosexual fraternity brothers. I became interested in exploring this topic because of stories I've heard through friends about queer people in Greek life, and I wanted to understand how non-heterosexual men in fraternities navigate this contradiction. The core question I sought to answer through this project is, how do non-heterosexual fraternity brothers experience belonging in their fraternities? To understand belonging, I draw on anthropologist Nura Yuval Davis, who argues that belonging is shaped by hegemony, where groups in power define the boundaries of who belongs and who doesn't. In fraternities, belonging is shaped in part by hegemonic masculinity and achieved through performing gender in line with hegemonic norms. And in this way, belonging in fraternities is shaped by hegemony. To explore this question, I conducted online person-centered interviews with 3 non-heterosexual fraternity brothers at a large public university in Southern California over the summer of 2025. Person-centered interviews are more conversational style interviews that seek to allow participants to guide interviews based on their experiences. For recruitment, I posted flyers advertising the project around the fraternity houses at the field site, in addition to posting the flyer online. This convenient sample allowed participation in the project to be entirely voluntary. So what did I find? Across these interviews, one thing stood out. For the men who participated in this project, their sense of belonging was not simply achieved. They actively negotiated their sense of belonging, particularly in the face of anticipated and witnessed instances of homophobia. They negotiated belonging through what I call self-preserving tactics, ways of protecting their sense of belonging in the face of instances of homophobia. These tactics included managing the visibility of their non-heterosexuality, regulating their responses to homophobia, and using humor strategically. To start with managing visibility, all three men described not revealing their non-heterosexuality to their fraternities on their own terms. Instead, they described experiences of managing how visible their sexuality was early in their fraternity experiences. Xavier told me, "When I first pledged, I never said I was gay. I told everybody I was straight because I didn't want to be that one gay guy." Pledging describes the process during which a group of prospective fraternity brothers attends fraternity events and goes through a series of trials, including hazing, before becoming full members. Later, when Xavier's fraternity brother started questioning his sexuality, he first presented himself as straight, then bisexual, before eventually allowing people to figure it out. What stands out here is Xavier's recognition of what it would mean to be openly gay, that he would be singled out as that one gay guy. In response to this anticipated alienation, Xavier attempts to hide the visibility of his non-heterosexuality as first straight, then bisexual, as his sexuality is continuously questioned. Brian described a different experience. When asked whether he was openly gay during the process of joining his fraternity, he explains, it's hard. I didn't walk around and be like, yeah. You know what I mean? I think people might have picked up on signals or something." While Xavier's changing presentation reflects a more active response to his anticipating being alienated on the basis of his sexuality, Brian describes existing in a kind of ambiguity, where he doesn't offer any information. Either way, they both reveal that they manage the visibility of their sexuality in the face of anticipated questioning and alienation. The second self-preserving tactic that emerged was how these men responded to homophobia. These men rarely described directly confronting or calling out homophobic behavior. Instead, they described reinterpreting uncomfortable moments of witnessed othering in the form of homophobia in ways that allowed relationships with their fraternity brothers to continue. For example, Xavier described a close friend who once admitted, "I don't feel comfortable around gay people." Immediately afterward, Xavier reflected, "I don't think he's homophobic because he's friends with me." This moment reveals how belonging is negotiated in Xavier's own experience through his reinterpretation of his friend's explicit homophobia. Similarly, Brian described fraternity brothers unexpectedly asking about his sexuality. He told me, people would be like, "What's your sexuality?" It would just be awkward. They would ask you explicitly. I don't know why people ask. It's just the weirdest thing to me. It's like, why would it matter, you know? It's interesting because it's Greek life, so I get it. I don't think it's ill-intended, but I just think asking someone is a little weird, unless it's a part of the conversation. But a lot of the times, it would just come out of the blue. What stands out here is Brian's reasoning through and justifying his experience of being singled out through his sexuality being questioned. Instead of this being ill-intended, it becomes only a little weird and just a part of Greek life. The next tactic, strategic humor, reflects a more everyday way that belonging is negotiated through how these men respond to homophobia. All three participants described gay jokes as a regular part of fraternity life and a particular expression of homophobia. But rather than rejecting these jokes, these men participated in them. Brian told me, "I think that's why they like me, is because I'm super joking." Yeah. I think that's also another aspect we get along is like, I make a lot of those jokes, and I don't get offended by them. Granny described joking with fraternity brothers as a kind of mutual back and forth. He shared, "I would never say that there's not homophobia in my fraternity, because there are jokes that are made. There are people who will make jokes at me because they know I'm okay with the jokes that they're making because we've talked about it. They will make gay jokes at me, and then I'll make anti-Semitic jokes back at them. It's just the back and forth." Of note, Grandy is part of a Jewish affinity fraternity. Here, humor becomes a token of gender performativity. Participating in these jokes aligns grandly with hegemonic masculinity, with the explicit outcome of also maintaining closeness with other fraternity brothers through reciprocal joking. Taken together, these stories reveal that belonging is not passive. These men were not simply accepted or rejected. They actively navigated hegemonic masculinity as a system of power that shaped their experience in a particular community while trying to maintain meaningful forms of connection. Even despite recognizing the reality of hegemonic masculinity in their fraternities, these men actively found ways to produce a sense of belonging. In many ways, their stories reveal that belonging is not simply something granted to us. It is something we continuously negotiate within the social worlds we inhabit. So in the end, this project leaves us with a broader question, not only about fraternities, but about a social world shaped by power. Who decides to whom we belong and how we belong? How do all of us negotiate belonging within systems that shape who we're allowed to be? Thank you.